They called it a gift, said I'd been too long without company, that even a man like me needed something soft to keep the dust from eating away at his soul. I didn't laugh with them, just took the crate, loaded it onto my wagon, and rode out of town before they could enjoy the show. The sun was near setting, brushing the plains in gold as if it could soften what they'd done. The crate was pine, nailed shut in a hurry, with slats wide enough to see through. I didn't look right away. I knew whatever was inside hadn't been treated kindly. By the time I reached my homestead, a cabin and a lean-to that barely clung to the earth, I'd made my choice. I unhitched the horse, set her loose in the paddock, then came back with a crowbar. The crate smelled of old sweat and fear. I pried the top off slowly. She didn't flinch when the light touched her face, just stared. Big eyes, rimmed in red, hair tangled and wild as prairie brush. She couldn't have been more than 25. Her legs were bent awkwardly beneath her, and she wasn't trying to move them. "Name's Colt," I said, quiet. "You ain't here for show. You're safe." Her gaze shifted like a bird's, quick, wary. She didn't answer. I didn't press her. I carried her out like I would a broken foal, gentle, with more care than I'd given anything in years. She weighed little, bones wrapped in faded calico, wrists marked with bruises that looked like old rope burns. Her legs, one was twisted, the foot limp. The other, I couldn't tell. Inside, I made her a bed near the fire, cleared the corner of old tools and laid down clean blankets. She didn't fight, but her hands clenched each time I moved too fast. I spoke soft while I worked, not because I thought she needed words, but because I did. I ain't gonna ask what they did. Don't want to shame you more than they already tried. But I'll bring you food, water, keep you warm. That's the promise. Still, she said nothing. But when I gave her a sip of water from my tin cup, she drank. That first night, I didn't sleep. Sat by the fire, listening. She didn't cry, didn't call out, just stared at the flames like she was trying to memorize their shape. I wondered if she'd ever slept in a place that didn't smell like fear. Come morning, I cooked beans and cornmeal, left a plate by her side. She didn't touch it until I left the room. When I came back, the plate was empty. She'd managed it on her own, hands only. Days passed like that. I fixed up the cabin a little, made her a proper chair with arms, lined it with wool so she wouldn't feel the hard wood. She still didn't speak, but she began watching me closely, measuring, thinking. That kind of silence ain't empty. It's heavy, full of the kind of words that never made it out in time. I didn't ask her name. Folks think names are owed, but sometimes they're the only thing a person's got left. So I waited. One evening, after I'd finished mending, a fence rail I came in to find her by the open window, the wind tugging at her hair. She was half slumped in the chair, a blanket over her knees, staring out at the dusk like she was listening for something only she could hear. "You ever see antelope run?" I asked, just to fill the quiet. She blinked slow. Then, soft, hoarse, like her throat had rusted over, she said, "June." It didn't sound like a name at first, just a breath, caught halfway between memory and surrender. But I knew. It was all she could give. "June," I repeated. "Good name." She nodded. Once. That was the first time she looked at me like I wasn't another cage. That night, I found her sketching something in the dust near her bed with a stick. 2 horses. One was bent low, injured. The other stood beside it, head lowered, not touching, just there. She saw me watching, and for a moment shame flickered across her face. I knelt beside her. "They're yours?" I asked. She hesitated, then gave the tiniest shrug. "They're good," I said, and meant it. After that, something shifted. She still didn't say much, but when I handed her food, she met my eyes. When I brought her books. She touched their covers with reverence. She started pulling herself upright, arm strength alone, moving inch by inch through the cabin like she meant to reclaim every board. I started to forget she'd been given to me as a joke. No one came to check on her. No one asked where she'd gone. That said enough about the kind of life she'd known before. Me, I'd been living ghost quiet for years, the kind of man folks nod at from a distance but never ask about. I didn't mind. Regret's a quiet companion, and I'd made peace with. Mine. Or so I thought. But June, she was different. She didn't ask for help, but she didn't refuse it either. She didn't weep, didn't rage. Just held herself like a storm that had already passed through, still fierce, still standing. She never asked why I didn't send her away. One night, as the wind stirred dry grass across the windows, I thought I heard her whisper something. "What was that?" I asked. She looked at me, eyes steady. "I don't want to be a burden." I swallowed hard. "You ain't," I said. "Not even close." She didn't answer. But that night, she slept with her face turned toward me, not the wall. And in that tiny shift, something broke open in me I hadn't known was still there. A man can live a long time thinking he's fine with silence, until someone teaches him how loud a little kindness can be. The days stretched long and quiet, like the land itself was holding its breath. June didn't speak often, but she was always watching, eyes the color of scorched wheat, never still. I learned her silences, how they shifted like weather. When she tilted her head a little, she wanted water. When her hands fidgeted with the edge of her blanket, she was trying to work something out in her mind. She never asked for anything. She just endured. It was a dry spring. I kept busy hauling water, checking fence lines, patching the roof before summer storms rolled through. Every night, I came back to the cabin and found June where I'd left her, only the light in her eyes moving. She hadn't walked, not once. Her legs lay quiet beneath the blankets like they'd forgotten they were meant to move. One morning, I left a bowl of wild strawberries on the table beside her. She didn't touch them at first. I was fixing the door hinges when I heard a sound I hadn't heard in years. Laughter. Just a breath of it, a tiny burst like a spark in dry grass. I turned. She was holding up one of the strawberries, squinting at it like it was the finest treasure she'd ever seen. Then she caught me looking and froze. I didn't say anything, just smiled and kept on working. That sound stayed with me the rest of the day. It was the kind of sound that made something small and aching shift in your chest. Later that week, I found some old wagon wheels and a busted chair behind the shed. Took me 2 days and a handful of splinters, but I built her. A rolling chair that could move across the porch. I lined it with sheepskin and oiled the axles until they moved smooth as butter. When I brought it inside, she looked at me like I'd handed her the whole horizon. "You built this?" she whispered. "Seemed like it might help," I said, rubbing the back of my neck. "Figure you've earned a little wind on your face." She didn't say thank you. Instead, she reached out, touched the arm of the chair like she was afraid it might vanish. I lifted her gently, set her in place, and rolled her to the porch. The air was cool, sharp with the scent of distant rain. June closed her eyes, tilted, her face to the wind like she hadn't breathed free air in years. And maybe she hadn't. After that, every morning started the same. I'd wheel her out before I headed to the fields, and she'd sit there for hours, watching birds rise and dust scatter. She started sketching again, this time with charcoal I brought from the general store. Her drawings were simple: wild horses, cottonwoods, the cabin. But there was something behind them, some kind of wild longing that words couldn't catch. I wanted to ask her about the fire, the one she'd hinted at, Wanted to ask why her legs didn't work, who'd put those bruises on her wrists, but I didn't. You don't pick at a wound just because you're curious. You wait until the person's ready to show the scar. One night, as thunder rolled low in the distance, she spoke without prompting. "I wasn't born like this," she said, voice brittle as old paper. I looked up from where I was oiling my saddle. She didn't meet my gaze. "There was a barn," she said, "in Mason Creek. Sheriff's boys didn't like that I told one of them no. Thought fire would change my mind." I sat very still. "Someone pulled me out," she went on. "Stable. Hand. Paid for it later." Her fingers tightened in her lap. I saw then what kind of fire had really tried to break her, and how much of it still burned in her veins. "Your legs?" I asked quietly. Spine cracked. Never healed right. She finally looked at me. I was passed around after that. Folks didn't know what to do with a girl who couldn't stand. Most just didn't want to look at me. I didn't know what to say. Words felt too small, too clean. So I did what I always did. I got up, stoked the fire, made her tea. Sat beside her while she stared into the flames and didn't ask for anything. The next morning, she didn't wait for me to lift her into the chair. She'd managed to drag herself halfway across the floor using just her arms. "I wanted to do it myself," she said, chest heaving. I didn't stop her, just steadied the chair while she climbed in. From that day on, she asked for nothing but space and time. She wheeled herself from corner to corner, figured out how to wash her own dishes, even managed to drag a blanket out to the porch one afternoon and set up a little painting station. She didn't speak much, but her art started to bloom. She painted the land, sunsets, storm clouds, the curl of smoke rising from our chimney. She painted me once too, though I only saw it by accident. I didn't say anything, just stared at the way she'd caught my eyes like she'd known them, longer than I had. "You don't smile much," she said that evening. I shrugged. Used to, before the war. She didn't ask which war. Didn't need to. Everyone's got their own kind of battlefield. "You look better when you do," she added. That night, I sat on the porch long after she went to sleep, watching lightning ripple across the sky. I thought about all the things we'd lost, her, body, my peace, and how strange it was that we'd found each other in the wreckage. She'd been given to me as a joke, left in a crate, broken and discarded. But every day she was building herself back with nothing but charcoal, silence, and will, and without ever asking, she was teaching me to do the same. June kept a small canvas tucked behind the stove, wrapped in linen like something too sacred for daylight. I never asked what it held. She'd show me when she was ready. Weeks rolled on, then months. By summer, the wheatgrass had grown tall around the cabin, and the air smelled of sun-warmed earth and wildflowers. Our lives fell into rhythm, quiet, steady. I did the outside work. She tended the hearth, painted, read. The silence between us wasn't hollow anymore. It had weight, shape, comfort. But peace, I've learned, don't last in the West. One afternoon I rode to town for supplies. Usually I kept to myself, traded quick, eyes down, no trouble. But this time I heard my name before I made it to the general store. "Colt Mercer," came the voice, lazy and sharp as a cracked whip. I turned slow. Jed Sutter leaned against the saloon post, boots caked in mud, a smirk hanging off his mouth like it had nowhere better to be. "You ever open that crate we gave you?" he asked, voice loud enough to turn heads. My jaw tensed. I didn't answer. "I reckon you've been getting mighty cozy with that little cripple," he went on, drawl dripping. "Heard she's real quiet. Bet that suits you just fine." Felt the heat rise behind my ears. My hand hovered near my belt, not for a gun, but to steady myself. "She's none of your business," I said. Jed laughed. Ain't that the point? We made her your business, Mercer. Thought we'd give you something to talk to besides your horse. A few men chuckled from the porch. I didn't look their way. She's got more strength in one finger than you've got in your whole damn spine, I said. Then I turned and walked on, not because I was afraid, but because I knew if I didn't, I'd bury that man in the dust right there. When I got home, June was in her chair by the window, sketching the way the clouds bent over the plains. I set the supplies down and went to the barn. Stayed there until my breathing settled. She didn't ask what happened. She just made coffee that evening and left an extra cup on the table, even though she never drank the stuff. A few days later, the first trouble came. Someone cut the line to the well bucket. Just clean through, sawed until the rope frayed to nothing. I fixed it without saying a word. Next came the dog. We didn't own one, but a stray had taken to sleeping under the porch, ribs showing, eyes skittish. June had named him Buckle, and I fed him scraps. One morning, he didn't come out. I found him curled behind the water barrel, a bullet through his side. I buried him while June painted in silence. Her jaw clenched so tight I thought it might crack. They'll try again, she said low. They can't stand what they gave you becoming something better. I know, I said. But the knowing didn't make it easier. I built a ramp to the storm cellar, started keeping my rifle by the front door. June, for all her frailty, didn't flinch. She kept painting, kept learning, kept refusing to hide. One evening I came in to find her standing, just for a breath. One hand on the counter, the other gripping the chair rail, legs trembling, eyes shining. June, I said, barely more than a whisper. She smiled, didn't fall. I crossed the room in 2 strides, caught her before her knees gave out. She laughed as I lowered her back into the chair. That's the first time in 4 years, she said, breathless. You did that, I said. Not me, not anyone else. Her smile faded a little. You gave me a place to try. That night, I unwrapped her hidden canvas. She didn't stop me. It was the 2 horses again, only now the one that had stood beside the injured one was kneeling, head bowed, as if offering its back. And the broken horse had one hoof lifted, mid-step. They're learning to carry each other, she said, voice quiet. I couldn't speak. Not then. We sat in the dark a long time after that, her hand resting lightly on mine, like she finally trusted it would stay. But peace, like I said, doesn't last. Not out here. The next morning, smoke rose on the far ridge. Too close to bow. Be a campfire, too sudden to be chance. I rode out and found a shed burnt to ash, one I'd built 2 years back for hay and tools. Nothing inside now but black bones and bitter air. They weren't just testing anymore. They were warning. That night June didn't sleep. I heard her breathing sharp in the dark. They'll come here next, she said. I'll be ready, I told her. You shouldn't have to be, she whispered. This was supposed to be your quiet place. It is, I said, because you're in it. She didn't speak after that, but she reached for my hand in the dark, and I let her hold it until morning crept in through the windows. The fear wasn't hers anymore. It was mine. They came at dusk, when the light softened and shadows bled longer than they should. I'd been waiting all afternoon, rifle cleaned and leaning beside the door. The wind held its breath. Even the birds were quiet. June was inside, chair drawn, close to the hearth. She'd painted that morning, a single streak of gold running through a field of storm-dark blue. Hope, she'd said, when I asked. The kind that won't ask permission. I heard the horses first, then the boots. 3 of them. Jed Sutter led, hat tipped low, that same slow smirk on his face like the world was just one long joke and he was the only one in on it. Well, well, he said, stepping up onto my porch like it belonged to him. "You gonna invite us in, Mercer? Or just keep staring like some barn cat?" "I've got nothing for you," I said. My voice was steady, flat. He eyed the rifle by the door, then glanced toward the window, where June's silhouette shifted, slightly behind the curtain. "You're wasting your time with her," Jed said, loud enough for her to hear. "Broken things don't mend, no matter how much polish you slap on them." My blood ran hot, but I didn't move. Not yet. "You burned her once," I said. "I won't let you try again." Jed's smirk cracked a little. "I didn't. Burn nothing. That girl brought it on herself. Talked too loud, acted too proud. Folks don't like that." "Folks like you," I corrected. He took a step forward. "Last chance, Mercer. Let us take her." "This ain't your fight." Behind me, the door creaked open. June's voice came, calm as a bell in fog. "No one's taking me." Jed blinked. June wheeled out onto the porch, face pale, spine straight, eyes lit with something fierce and steady. "She speaks," Jed muttered. "Didn't think you had it in you." "I had more than you ever saw," she said, "but you never looked past the part you thought you could ruin." Jed laughed, but it was hollow now. "You think this cripple's gonna stop me?" he said, turning to me. "No," I answered. "I will." Before he could speak again, I raised the rifle, not aimed, not shaking, just present. His buddies stiffened. Jed took one hard look at me, then at June. "This ain't over," he spat, backing off the porch. "Yes, it is," June said, voice like iron under silk. "It's over because I said so." They left. No gunfire, no blood, just the long, shuffling retreat of cowards denied their sport. When they were gone, I set the rifle down slow. June let out a breath and closed her eyes. "That was brave," I said. "No," she murmured. "It was necessary." We didn't sleep much that night, but the sky was clearer than it had been in months. Stars poured down like they were trying to wash the world clean. In the days that followed, word spread fast. Jed left town. Too much shame, not enough spine. The folks who'd laughed with him got quiet. Some came by with apologies wrapped in fresh bread or mended blankets. I took what was honest, refused what wasn't. June kept painting. Only now her skies opened wider, her fields stretched longer. And one day, I came in from the barn to find her not in her chair, but standing, clinging to the table edge. One foot planted firm. She turned when she heard me, eyes wide, smile trembling. "I can't walk far," she said, "but I can stand." I walked to her slow, hands open. "You've come farther than most ever will." She reached out. Let me hold her for the first time, not because she needed help, but because she chose to. We married under the cottonwoods 2 weeks later, just us and the wind, and a sky full of promise. They used to say she was given to me as a joke, but they didn't see what I saw. A woman who fought fire with silence and came out shining. A woman who turned a broken body into a work of art. A woman who made my hollow house a home. And me? I was the lonely cowboy, too quiet for town, too haunted for love. But June never asked me to speak more than I could. She just stayed, watched, painted me in light even when I felt made of ash. Now, when people ride past our land and see her on the porch, head high, brush in hand, they don't see a paralyzed woman. They see the pride of the plains, and they nod. And they keep riding.